Hey, what's going on, bike people of the internet? Back with another bike restoration. This time it's going to be a 1997 Cannondale R700. I picked this up off eBay. I got it for a real good steal, £166, which I think is pretty good. But big thing was it's missing a seat clamp, so let's put a seat clamp on it first because I've got a spare Cannondale's Coda seat clamp and we can resolve this really easily. So this seat clamp is off of my Cannondale F600 from 95, so similar age, it worked quite nicely. I've replaced this with a Hope one on that bike, and if you'd like to see a video of that bike, I'll link one up above right now. But yeah, let's get this seat clamp on here and then go over the bike, and I think the missing seat clamp actually kind of aided me when I bought this bike because it sold on eBay for 166 quid, which is, I think, a pretty good buy, and it's got some kind of nice bits. It's kind of interesting. So yeah, let's get into that, shall we? So with that fixed, let's have a fly around the bike and see what's wrong with it. I mean, it looks pretty good to me. It's not 100% perfect, but it's decent. There's a couple of little knocks and marks on it which aren't perfect, but yeah, it's a 97, looking at the date stamp in the bottom bracket, R700. And interestingly, I don't think this is any catalogue, so I'm wondering if it's the Euro specific ones, like Cycles TACnet. I don't know what that is. It sounds like a European shop to me. Size 56, which is pretty good, although it's sized up more like a 58, I think, in this old-fashioned style compared to modern ones. You've got Shimano 105 and Ultegra mix of a drivetrain, but yeah, let's not worry about that for now. It's quite nice. It's terribly huge rings and like a really tiny cassette. It's like a 1125 cassette, so a proper like corn cob 9-speed rear cassette there. So yeah, riding this was interesting compared to what I'm used to. Yeah, so we've got a mix of 105 and Ultegra across the bike, and interestingly, and supporting the sort of European hypothesis on this bike, was the brakes are set up Euro style, so front brake on the left. We've got this ITM stem, which I'm not super keen on. These Dida bars are kind of aero profile, but they've got like an absolutely huge drop on them, so I won't see myself keeping those personally. We've got Ultegra 9-speed shifters, nothing wrong with them, but they look a bit dated with the cable poking out the side, so might do a change on that. Not 100% sure what I'm going to do on this bike just yet. I need to get a feel for it. It's been upgraded with the slice fork there, as you can see. We've got this tiny 23mm wide Schwably yellow tyres there. We've got Mavic Caesarium wheels, which are one of the things that really caught my eye on this bike that I don't think the advertiser particularly sold it on. So yeah, we've got some real nice lightweight wheels. 105 brakes, so yeah, keeping with the Shimano theme here. Some zany handlebar tape, which I actually quite like. But overall, yeah, it's in decent condition. It's just not really appropriate for the area I live in, and I want to update it and sort of do a resto mod on it, I think. And yeah, someone had paid attention to detail with those yellow valve caps. So yeah, it's definitely loved and cared for, but previously. So one last thing, let's use the chain checker and see the state of chain. So I'm starting at 0.75. That's okay, not dropping through. And going to the 0.5, and it just about pushes through with a bit of resistance, so it's probably right on the cusp of needing a new chain, so that's good. We're going to tear the bike down anyhow, and that's good information, so we could keep the cassette if we need to reuse it in the future. Okay, so let's get into this teardown. We're going to start by removing the chain as always, because it just gets in the way otherwise. So yeah, first thing, let's take the chain off. Next, we're going to take off the chain set. We're going to follow my usual strategy of removing the chain set and trying to remove the bottom bracket straight away, because these are the two areas on the bike that's likely to get stuck into the frame. The chain set, especially if they're the square tapered type like this, which has an aluminium crank arm and a steel spindle, like to interact with each other and galvanic corrode together, and they can get stuck together. But as you can see, in this case, it came off relatively easy and didn't cause any problems. As you see, I'm just checking the tightness of the tool into the chain set there. That's a sort of a critical thing to do, otherwise you are potentially stripping the threads out your crank if it's super tight onto the spindle. So yeah, always like make sure you winch the tool into the chain set so that threads are fully engaged. Onto the non-drive side now. The crank arm came off relatively easy. Actually, every bolt on these chain sets feels relatively loose, like they haven't been torqued up fully, which is a little concerning, but it is what it is. It's my bike now and I've got to resolve these issues. So yeah, the bolt came out with no problems at all. It actually felt slightly loose in there if anything. And once again, we're looking for any washers inside before winding the chain set removal tool on, and just make sure that's fully home using a spanner. Yeah, like I say, it's a possibility you can strip the threads out of the crank, and then it becomes an absolute mission to remove it from the bike. So I'm definitely going to keep this chain set for the future. I think I might reuse it on this bike, or I might use it on different projects. It's quite nice, I think. It's a 172.5, which is 5mm longer than what I usually run. I usually run the 170, so each side 5mm overall. But yeah, it's in good condition. So we're onto the bottom bracket now, and this is where it starts to go wrong. And like many of my projects recently, the bottom bracket is fully stuck in the frame. I can't seem to get any luck with these. I'm leaning on it here with all my weight I've got possible on this little breaker bar, and it is not moving at all. I thought I'd go around to the non-drive side and lean on that and try to tighten it just to see if I can break the friction. It's just not going. One tip here is to put the bike on the floor before you start trying to remove the bottom bracket. That way you're not stressing the seat post in any way, so all your weight's going through the wheels like normal, rather than you're sort of putting all your weight against the seat post and it's clamped on the actual post, rather than the actual, you know, the weight goes through the saddle and it goes tangentially through the post, or perpendicularly through the post, rather than sort of getting a moment arm on it. But yeah, the bottom bracket is fully like stuck and seized in the frame. So let's move on for now. We'll remove a lot of the components and take off that little plastic cover, plastic cable guide, and heat up the bottom bracket area and remove it later. But yeah, let's remove all the other parts from the bike. So yeah, obviously cut all the cables. It's one thing I like doing, is cutting the cables. It like feels like a definitive I'm stripping this bike down moment when you do it. Yeah, it's just a sort of it feels like a defining moment in the bike when you cut the cables. And with the cables free from the bike, we then can remove this little bracket down here, which will then enable us to sort of put the heat gun into the area, because you don't want to heat gun the bottom bracket with this little plastic guide in here, because it will just melt or catch on fire. So just get rid of it, remove it from the bike. And whilst the bike is on the stand, we might as well remove all the derailleurs whilst we're here, because it just feels like the right thing to do. There's no particular order for this, so they need to come off anyhow. So yeah, let's remove this derailleur, this 105 front derailleur. One aspect I really like about this bike is like the front derailleur braze-on is a bolt-on instead of being sort of riveted or brazed onto the frame. So it could be a good potential for a really neat looking one by without any sort of additional bracketry that's left on the frame there. So something I'm considering doing for sure. Onto the rear derailleur next, and that comes off, yeah, no problems at all really. Pull the cable out here and yeah, it all undid itself pretty nice. It's yeah, this old Ultegra stuff is kind of like swoopy 90s looking, I think. It's sort of like all the derailleurs now are very angular and aggressive looking, whereas this is kind of swoopy and pillowy looking. It's kind of like car design almost, I think, derailleurs. Like at the moment derailleurs are pretty aggressive, but I think they're sort of dialing back a bit. And I think it's the same with cars. Like cars from the 90s were sort of bubbly and swoopy and all aerodynamic looking, but now they're kind of like aggressive with big vents and holes in them, and I think it's quite similar similar things with derailleurs at the moment, and you can see made in Japan. It's definitely worth keeping. I'm not putting it, throwing this one away for sure. And the final thing I want to do is remove this sort of, I don't know what this is called. Is it like a braze-on band clamp? So yeah, let's remove this because I think I might go one bar on this bike. I'm not 100% sure at this point in time, but it would look cool. Definitely like nice and uninterrupted. So let's tackle this bottom bracket now. As you can see, I've put the bike back onto the floor, and here's my super cheap little heater. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to heat up the material around this area because the aluminium will expand faster than the steel. Hopefully this will then break free the bottom bracket and make it easier to remove. My big concern is the paintwork on the bike, so I'm trying to keep the heat gun relatively far away from the bike so I don't overheat it, but I just want to warm up the whole area sufficiently to create a growth in the material so the friction is reduced, or the aluminium grows around the thread. So yeah, that's the plan, because the steel should expand at a slower rate than aluminium, so it should loosen off eventually. So first round didn't budge again, so more heat, and I'm kind of sort of testing the area with my hand occasionally to make sure it's within the right realm. And then yeah, I put my small little breaker bar on it, and it just goes a tiny bit. I feel it go, but it's kind of sticky feeling. So what I did is, I wouldn't recommend this. I went and got a really old handlebar to sort of make my lever longer, and yeah, I managed to unwind the bottom bracket from this side of the bike. But yeah, it's kind of like sticky in there at the moment. But once that sort of initial force is overcome, the friction force, you can just do it by hand then. Ideally I should put a ratchet onto this and use it that way, but it got there in the end. But yeah, it took a little bit of paint off the frame, not frame off the paint. But yeah, we got there in the end, and this side of the bottom bracket came out with no issues at all. And as my cack-handed spanner work finishes, you can see there's quite a bit of crud in the bottom bracket shell. We'll explore that in a minute. Let's move on to the non-drive side. Generally, with one side removed, the other side becomes much easier to remove as well. I'm not sure why. Maybe there's some sort of concentric forces going on between the two sides and the way they interact. But once one side is removed, the drive side usually, on this type of bottom brackets, the other side becomes easier to remove. But those, again, this side feels like sticky. It's the best way to describe it. So yeah, let's keep pulling it out. It's a bit of a faff at the moment. It's still kind of tight in there, but the bottom bracket is still semi-warm is the best way to describe it from the prior heating, but it's moving, so it's just a case of unwinding it. So yeah, this is coming out slowly. My bottom bracket tool is not working particularly well in this, or I almost need one that I can like bolt through the frame so the teeth remain aligned to the bottom bracket shell, because every time you put some sort of long force on it, it's sort of twisting its way out of the threads here. So something I need to look into getting is a different type of bottom bracket tool, I think. Anyhow, after much faffing around, it eventually came out. My cack-handed spanner skills are not showing themselves much glory here with this. Used to how many times this bottom bracket tool has slipped out, but yeah, we got it out in the end. So here it comes. It's a case of unwinding the last few threads, and it should fall out any moment now as I'm voicing over. I hope. Yeah, it's not quite there. Come on. There we go. And it's finally out the frame. Let's have a look inside the bottom bracket shell. So as we look inside, you can see some dust and debris in there. I'm not sure if this is sand or if it's the remains of a label that's been used before, but the thing that's kind of catching my eye is it looks like there's some white deposits around the outside of the bottom bracket thread there. I think this might be thread locker that was used in the frame to sort of keep the bottom bracket in from my experience. I'm not 100% sure, but we'll clean this out and we'll sort it out in the future. So with those giant pain in the butt pieces of work done, we can move on to dropping the wheels out the frame now. They're no longer needed because we've removed the tricky thing. They come out no problems at all. What do you reckon on these yellow tyres? Would you keep them or would you get something different? I'm in two minds myself. I think black would look better, but I kind of like them, but I think in the real world they're going to look a bit corny. So onto the bar tape, and I sort of filmed this as a time-lapsey montage because no one needs to see this, but yeah, it came off the bars and it left a horrible messy residue on the bars. It must have been on there quite some time to sort of get stuck on this badly, so yeah, there's quite a lot of picking and you can see the residual sort of tapey glue stuff on there, so that come off with a bit of a scalpel work and finding some edges and peeling it all off. But I don't think I'm going to reuse these bars, but for the future they might go on another project in the distance or for a bike I sell or pass on. I just want to get them kind of tidy before sticking them into storage because I don't like these bars, but someone might in the future, or if I'm just looking to offload a bike, I might put them onto that bike in the future. Yeah, so just taking all the sticky tape off and yeah, trying to tidy up as I go really. So with the bars clean enough for now, we can look at removing the STI shifters or brifters. I don't really like using the word brifter. What's it short for? Brake shifter? It's just a bit cringy to me. So I call it the STIs, or I think that sounds Shimano technology integrated or something, doesn't it? But yeah, let's remove the shifters, and what I'm doing at the moment is trying to figure out where the fixing is for doing it up. On my usual ones it's above here, but I'm kind of peeling back the hood and I can't see anything, so I've sort of rolled the rear end of the hood towards the bars and I just see the little screw poking out there. So yeah, we try to sort of roll this forwards and get onto that. I was thinking to myself, this can't be right. I'm kind of putting a lot of force onto this rubber trying to get the Allen key in here, so I thought I'd try to tackle it from the other side by rolling the front of the shifter down, and it works better this way. I think kind of the rubber kind of goes harder over the years on these, so it's less pliable. So it's a case of just doubling it over at the back here and rolling it forwards, and you'll get access to the bolt this way. So if you're looking at removing these shifters for yourself in the future, yeah, pull the rubber from the front to the back. That works better. Onto the left hand side version now, and it's much the same as right now. We learned where the bolt is and how it likes to be sort of accessed. We just roll the rubber back, and yeah, we're easy access to the bolt this time. Next, let's remove the brakes from the frame. I'm also super curious of the construction of this fork at this stage. I think it's probably composite legs with aluminium crown and hopefully an aluminium or steel steerer. I think this is probably time before sort of unibody forks that we have nowadays, but full carbon fiber forks have their issues if we're not, and generally need a lot more TLC than these older forks. So it's something to look at yourself in the future. Look for the ring of death. So if you're not sure what that is, have a Google and make sure you're buying bikes that ring of death free. So yeah, the brake calipers come off no problems. This rear one's a kind of a bit of a fiddle to get in here with my sort of long Bonthurst Allen keys, but yeah, we get there in the end. Bars off next. I did this as a little time lapse, and I always put the bolts back in afterwards so they don't get lost. And with that we can kind of assess the steering. It's a bit grumpy, I would say, but it feels serviceable. It's kind of not super feel-free feeling, but we'll have a look inside and see what we can do. So yeah, let's unbolt this stem. So the stem top cap's branded a 3T1. I'm not super keen on that, so it doesn't match the stem, and I'm not super keen on the 3T brand these days. It's not the great brand it used to be. So yeah, just unbolt the stem, and we're in for some surprises in here in a minute if you keep watching. So yeah, the stem come off no problems at all, and here's the big surprise. This is a 1-inch A headset bike on this, so there's a shim in the stem. So yeah, it's quite funny. So they've kind of shimmed the headset here up to like 1.8 inches, just to be able to use a spacer and a stem on it. I mean, finding a 1-inch stem these days is going to be nigh on impossible, so it's the right thing to do. But I just found it sort of semi-humorous that you have the steerer, which is metallic. I think it's steel actually, which is super good, super reliable and solid. It's never going to go wrong. So yeah, we have a series of shims to get the steering diameter up to sort of the modern standard where it was. I find it a bit odd because road bikes, well, mountain bikes in this day and age, literally 97 would have been like, if you had a performance mountain bike, it was 1 inch and 1/8 headset. It was set in stone. That's what you had, unless you had a Cannondale with a head shock. And the road bikes are just behind. It's, you know, some of these bikes were still being sold with quill stems at this point in time, and I think this stands to today that the roadies are hesitant to pick up new technology. They're always about aero and blah 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 blah. But I just think if you want to see where the future of the sport, any sport, is in cycling, look what the mountain bikes are doing. They're technologically ahead of the road bikes even to this day, and they set the standards. So with all that said, let's take a look inside this headset and see the state of it. So inside we have taper roller bearings, and they're looking, if it will focus, there we go. Yeah, they look like this very contaminated with water, so they definitely need to be flushed out and sorted. Here's a time lapse of the bottle cages being removed. Nothing wrong with those, might reuse them. And the saddle, same as time lapse, they're removing that. It's a nice Tagliatelle unit, I could reuse it in the future. And with the frame naked, let's give it a quick wash down and see what condition the paint's in. Generally, it's really good, I think. Personally, I've got no qualms with the paint on this bike. It's a solid 7 out of 10. It's got a couple of bubbly points and a couple of scratches, but nothing to write home about. And that's about it for this video. Please join me in the second part where we're going to build this bike up into something cool and modern, I feel. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Cheers.